Welcome, everyone. The last couple of weeks, we've spent a good bit of time looking back at where we've been. And for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be looking at what's happening now in Tallahassee. And tonight we have a couple of speakers who are going to talk about some neighborhood revitalization efforts. So I'd like to introduce John Baker, one of our speakers. John is manager of the City of Tallahassee Neighborhood Affairs Division. And he has over 30 years of experience in community, neighborhood, and sustainability planning. Previously, he worked for the state of Florida Department of Community Affairs and Tallahassee Leon County Planning Department. John holds a graduate degree from Florida State in urban and regional planning. His work in neighborhood planning and sustainability has been recognized nationally and internationally. John, we're so pleased to have you.
Good to be here.
And our other speaker is Minjee Kim. She is an assistant professor at Florida State University's Department of Urban and Regional Planning. She studies the relationship between real estate development and urban planning and writes about land value capture, large-scale real estate developments, and negotiated developments. She earned her PhD and master's degrees from MIT and has multiple years of experience working with local governments, including the cities of Boston and Cambridge. Her goal is to identify how planners and policymakers can harness the forces of real estate development to further progressive planning values and encourage equitable development outcomes. And Minjee's going to start out this evening by giving us a brief introduction to what we'll be talking about.
Sure. Thank you, Barbara, for the introduction, and Gloria for and Tisha for inviting us and making this opportunity possible. So I will go ahead and start sharing my screen. And can everyone see the presentation? Does it say community-based efforts? Great. All right, so really happy to be here today, and I am looking forward to what you think the presentation was, how the presentation was at the end of it. But the way that we're gonna do this today, I am gonna talk for about 10 minutes. And although Gloria said we'll look forward, my first 10-minute presentation will be, again, looking backward, but with a very specific planning focused lens, planning and zoning focused lens, and looking at the history of planning and zoning and its relationship or how it relates to racism. So I'll give that sort of context, and then John will take it from there and share what has the exciting, really super exciting and rigorous community-based planning work that he's been leading in Tallahassee, and share all the good stuff. And then I'll wrap it up with sharing my role, or talking about my role as the chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee of the Tallahassee CRA. So you might have heard of it, and some of you might know the CRA better than others, but I'll give an overview of what the CRA is and talk about how Citizens Advisory Committee sees itself, its role in the process of decision making. So you'll hear from me, John, and then back to me. And so with that, I'll get started on my presentation. So first of all, I wasn't sure what this crowd, how many people are familiar with the planning and zoning and basics of some of the technical jargon that gets thrown around. So can I have, I'm trying to get everyone on my screen so that I can see everyone's face. Can I have a show of hands in terms of who knows about zoning and who, feel like you're comfortable, you know what zoning is? Can I have a show of hands? Okay, good. So it's most of the audience, which is good. So I won't belabor too much on the very basic stuff. But zoning it's exactly what it is. It is zoning a city or a jurisdiction into different districts, and then assigning use, bulk or use and building form regulations about the land use and building form based on the district designation. In Florida, it's a little different than other states in that Florida state statute has two-tier system. So there's the comprehensive plan of a municipality, and every single municipality, cities and counties in Florida has to have a comprehensive plan. And in that comprehensive plan, and that's a long-term sort of vision plan. And in that comprehensive plan, there's the future land use map, which shows what the city envisions for the future land uses, which is what you see on the right here. This is different from local zoning ordinance, which is the second tier as I see it. That's the local law regulation that governs what can happen on a specific parcel. So if you own a property, you're going to be zoned for one district, or there could be multiple sort of layers of zoning, but you basically have one base zoning district. But your future land use map might show that your parcel can be used for different uses than which is different from the current current zoning designation. So that's the two-tier system that Florida has. And then so now that I've talked about zoning, I want to go back to the discriminatory origins of zoning. So zoning from its very beginning, so zoning came from Germany, but in Germany, it took a very different form than how it took off in the US. So in the US, from the very early on, zoning and pre-modern zoning had very specific racially motivated land use intentions or restrictions on land use that were racially motivated. So example being in San Francisco, the city adopted a local ordinance banning public laundries in most areas of the city, and that was targeting Chinese population that were owning and operating in these public laundries and also congregating in those laundries. So that's an example of a pre-modern zoning that had a racial intent. And then the very, I guess, officially recognized first comprehensive zoning resolution is 1916 New York City zoning resolution. And that the impetus for that 1916 resolution was also based on, well, this was less about race, but this was more about class. So the Fifth Street, as most of you will know, is an affluent sort of commercial district or commercial street in New York, and the merchants who own the properties, own the shops, and the homeowners, a lot in and around Fifth Street did not want the garment district workers manufacturing from encroaching into their area, which is the image that you see on the right side. So and because they wanted to restrict the encroachment of manufacturing uses, they created this zoning resolution to essentially prohibit manufacturing in and around Fifth Avenue. So those are some early examples. And then in the early 1910, 1911, explicitly racial zoning was introduced. So which was first implemented in Baltimore. So basically what it was is that if a block is majority owned by majority white homeowners, Black people cannot purchase or live on those neighborhoods, and then vice versa. So if a block is a majority Black neighborhood or Black resident and homeowners, white people are not allowed to live on those blocks. So that was in the 1910, 1911. And in the 1910s, this explicit racial zoning spread really rapidly, especially around south of south of the country. And then, but in 1917, in a Supreme Court case, U.S. Supreme Court case, Buchanan versus Worley outlawed explicit racial zoning. So Worley, who was Black, was buying home from this guy Buchanan, realtor, and could not complete the transaction because of this local zoning ordinance that was racial zoning. So the Supreme Court said you can't do that, but it's interesting that the basis of outlawing this racial zoning was because Buchanan, white person, could not sell the home. So that was a little bit of a twist there, in that it wasn't necessarily this decision wasn't necessarily trying to get at racial equity per se, but it was more about private property, private property, period. All right, so, and then in 1926, another landmark Supreme Court case called Euclid versus Ambler characterized apartments as parasites and contrasted with single family detached homes. So basically this decision upheld the constitutionality of zoning, sort of authorizing local governments to zone, first of all, and that's what this case is most known for. But underlying that sort of first level implication of the case, the second layer was that it upheld the superiority of detached single family housing. So you can see that in the decision, the development of apartment home greatly retards the character of single family districts, and that in this environment, apartment houses are mere parasite trying to take advantage of the open space and attractive surroundings and of the single family subdivisions. And so from the very early days of zoning, the zoning and planning system started to prioritize detached single family housing, and also sort of created almost like a class system in terms of the types of housing and who gets to live in those housing. So now I talked about how Buchanan versus Worley outlawed explicit racial zoning. So after that, what has happened? And so many southern cities continued to the use of racial zoning. It continued, like some of the cities had the racial zoning up until the 60s and 50s and 60s. But there were also informal enforcement of racial zoning. So what the map that you see on the right here, it's from Birmingham, Alabama, and the hatched area that you see on the map indicated informally. It didn't have an official sort of legend saying that what this is, but it was an informal way of indicating Black neighborhoods, which was then used by white supremacists and to attack those Black neighborhoods, basically. So it was an informal enforcement of racial zoning. And then there are what's called the expulsive zoning practices. So one example, a common practice that was used was citing of industrial uses around Black communities, and also urban renewal in the 1950s, 60s were called Negro removal because they were targeting specifically Black neighborhoods and raising those neighborhoods to build urban renewal projects. And we also have that example in Tallahassee, as some of you may already be aware of. So Smokey Hollow in Tallahassee, was one of the thriving Black neighborhoods in the 1950s. Well, it was formed in the late 1980s or 80s, or I'm sorry, 1880s, and it thrived, but it came to be it got designated as a blighted area, and then ultimately the homes were torn down. There are some markers in that neighborhood that shows what the neighborhood was like. So there are some historic markers and in that neighborhood right now, but this is an explicit example of how Black neighborhoods were targeted in planning and zoning. And also another very common example of racially motivated planning and zoning tool is restrictive covenants, which is not necessarily implemented or enforced by cities, but it's a private contract between private parties. This Benton Hills neighborhood in Tallahassee had a restrictive race covenant that was discriminatory. So in 1939, dated in 1939, the restrictive covenant basically says that no person other than the Caucasian race should live in the community. And then you also know the redlining practices that was widely implemented and adopted from the 1920s up through 1960s and right before the Fair Housing Act in 1968. And so what you see, the links that you've, and I don't know if what the distribution of the slides will be, but these are some really great websites that you can go to learn about this history, if that is of your, if anyone wants to do so. And I will end with the final slide, which is talking about Tallahassee today. So Tallahassee today is still considered as a segregated city in terms of income and race. So the map you see on the upper side is the census, or I'm sorry, the median or distribution of median income. And then the map you see on the bottom is by race. So census block level race composition. And so these are the areas where majority Black communities are located versus, as you can see on the map, on top, you see that the median income is higher in the northern side of the city. So so here, I mean, this is what Tallahassee is today, and there's obviously then room for improvement, which is great, and which is what John will be talking about to sort of remedy the historic and inequities that existed in planning and zoning, and what Tallahassee is doing in order to do so, to remedy that past. But some examples, contemporary examples of not necessarily racism, but disproportionate impacts on Black communities include incremental gentrification and displacement, and uneven distribution of public investment and resources, and as well as planned neighborhoods that are really expensive to build, so they're beyond the reach of low-income neighborhoods, who tend to be disproportionately racial minority groups. So these are some contemporary examples of how planning and zoning still intersects with racial inequity. So with that, I will now turn over to John, who will talk about exciting new initiatives that the city has been undertaking recently. We'll stop share.
Thank you, Minjee. Let me share my presentation. All right, can you all see my screen? Awesome. So,
Yes.
all right, so Dr. Minjee took you up 30,000 feet. I'm gonna take you perhaps down on the ground. So this will be an helicopter flight rather than a 727 jet. Want to share with you about one of the city's current program that focuses on neighborhoods and neighborhoods, particularly in the core area of the city. And so I want to talk to you about the Neighborhood Public Safety Initiative. a collaborative effort between law enforcement and the community to address and to create safer neighborhood, which involves more than just arresting or locking up folk. It's a holistic approach to how we make neighborhoods safer, and therefore as a means to address crime and produce safer neighborhoods. But perhaps before I get into that, I just want to share a little bit about the city's engagement with neighborhoods over the years. Starting in the 70s was when City of Tallahassee had a dedicated office and staff focusing on neighborhoods. And in the 80s, that got further enhanced with the community liaison officer, and then that continued to exist. In 2000, the city hired its first neighborhood planner. That was myself, and I worked with the Community Neighborhood Renaissance Program. Had the pleasure of working with some of the members from Trinity. Trinity was one of the participating covenant partner churches in that effort. I think many of you probably may know Laura Chapman, who still works with the Providence neighborhood, dating all the way back to 2000 when we worked together in the planning department. In 2017, our then city manager, having heard from residents of the need to enhance the city's focus and services to neighborhood, enhance the neighborhood division within the Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Affairs, and brought several staff from other parts of the government into that division. And myself, along with 7 others, were brought into the division. So one of the first program that we implemented to address neighborhoods is the Neighborhood Public Safety Initiative. And this is a different and very innovative way of approaching neighborhood planning, neighborhood revitalization. This is looking at it through the eyes of public safety. And one of the things is, you probably may remember, and we're still, a city being impacted by crime, but back in 2017, there were just, you'd read so much about shootings and, different confrontation with police. And so our deputy city manager set out to bring all the local law enforcement agencies operating in Lincoln County together. And out of that collaboration, they form a working group that is called the Local Public Safety Collective. And through that collective, they share across jurisdiction crime, prevention information and various intelligence, but they also created a public engagement aspect to it, and that is the Neighborhood Public Safety Initiative. Knowing that they could not police their way out of crime or create safer neighborhoods by just arresting people, they sought to engage with neighborhoods, and they came up with the Public Safety Initiative. This initiative offers a wide variety of programs to participate in neighborhoods, building partnership with them and getting them involved in creating safe communities. Again, the beginnings of the Neighborhood Public Safety Initiative came about because of the concern about crime and a need to involve residents in making where they live much safer, focusing on crime prevention education, community beautification, and working collaboratively with communities to address these concerns. The initiative selected 5 neighborhoods to start with. 2 on the north side of town, that's the greater Frenchtown and Griffin Heights. In fact, we just adopted the plan produced by Griffin Heights this afternoon. The city adopted that plan and awarded them $2.25 million for their kickoff project. So we're excited about that. The other 3 communities are on the south side of town: South City, Greater Bond, and Providence. Greater Bond was the first community for us to work with in this neighborhood planning effort. You may ask, why were these 5 communities selected? They were selected because at the time back in 27, and perhaps even still now, they were experiencing a higher incident, a higher rate of crime was occurring in their neighborhood. And so this was a push between all the members of the collective. How can we work with these neighborhoods to address crime through community beautification, crime prevention, education, and volunteerism. At the heart of this effort is community engagement. We know that we have to engage with communities. We have experienced the top-down approach, and we know that it doesn't work. And we engage with these participating communities to better understand and assess what's happening within their community. There are things that are happening, and there are things in a community that unless you talk with residents, you wouldn't know the significance of it. So engagement with the community is fundamental for us to make certain that whatever solutions that's being proposed align with what the neighborhood needs, and to also give residents a sense of ownership, and to allow neighborhoods to agree, to share their grievances. When we started in Bond, the first 5 meetings, people were really upset, and they told me, Mr. Baker, this has been happening here for 50 years, and so we had to give them an opportunity to share their grievance rather than just going, okay, we'll fix the street light, we'll fix this pothole, we'll do a housing program. I had to give them the opportunity to talk about the conditions of their neighborhood, why it has been that way. And then after I've done that, we said, let's get to work. All right. In the crime prevention area, here we are working with neighborhoods to establish and to strengthen their neighborhood crime watch. Some of these communities already have a neighborhood crime watch working with TPD, bringing services to them that allow them to target harden their property through property safety assessment, a service offered by TPD, and to share with them or to teach them how to report crime anonymously. In the community beautification area here, our effort is to get people out in their community, taking care of the public spaces, educating them about code enforcement process, educating them about solid waste, and having one of the first initiative that we do in these communities, a walk-a-block assessment, where we get residents along with volunteers walking the community, assessing the community, and see what's wrong, what needs to be fixed. And all of that effort leads into what we call a neighborhood blitz. And this is where we would marshal city resources and target that neighborhood with those resources over probably a 4 or 6 weeks period, bringing in city services and addressing things that, may need to be repaired. Communities, another focus area for this initiative is community empowerment, empowering them to take their community back, get involved, through Community Service Day, reaching out to disconnected youth, getting them hooked up in our Temple program, educating them how to stay connected with each other. The initiative is staffed by my division, Neighborhood Affairs, and we work very closely with the planning department, and some of the projects that comes out of these plans are funded through city department, but I know Dr. Minjee will talk about the CRA. The CRA has been a great funder for these efforts because most of the communities that we're working with now are within the CRA district. As you know, with the passing of the American Rescue Plan funding, we were able to get some of that, and we're using some of that for funding the Griffin Heights plan. So the major program that NPSI offers these 5 participating community is a brand new neighborhood planning program that's called Neighborhood First. This is where we work with the community to address their priority issues. What are the issues in your neighborhood that you would like to address? And we bring to them a wide array of services to develop a plan to respond to those needs. Why Neighborhood First and why this approach? We believe that this approach is successful, and it has shown itself to be so because it is resident-led. The residents of the community want it. They lead the process. City staff and others are there just to help to facilitate, to educate, so they come to the solutions that they believe are best for their community. It's all about ownership, them owning the outcome and wanting to see change happen in their neighborhood. And critical to that process is neighborhood leadership. The Neighborhood First process is led by a group of interested volunteer residents. That group is called the Community Action Team, and it's made up of homeowners, renters, neighborhood churches, neighborhood residents, school, representative from the school PTO, just a wide cross section of people come together to form the Community Action Team that provides the leadership working with city staff. Part of why this approach is successful is because we have an established process. It's not, well, what goes. There's an established process that includes a facilitator where we bring in someone who will work with staff to facilitate meetings. So people, when they come to these meetings, they're free to express their ideas. They're not inhibited by staff. I got to work with staff, so I got to be careful of what I say. No, it's a mutual facilitator that works with them and help them to develop ideas to address their neighborhood concerns. It's all about consensus building. It's bringing them together on one page, not only about what are the priority issues for the neighborhood, but what are the possible solution. And as you can tell, that's not always easy. A lot of people come to these processes with different political aspiration, different axes to grind. And so it is, while you're doing the technical work, just managing the group dynamics is also a very challenging aspect of it. Very challenging, but when we can get it together, as we have in the last 3 plans, it is a very rewarding process. Here's the structure that we have put together to lead neighborhoods through this process. Like I said, it's led by a CAT team, and you can see here the folks who are recruited. We do one-on-one, recruitment, working with the neighborhood association to bring the right people or to invite the right people to the table so that the solutions that come out of this process is reflective of not only homeowners, but renters. It's reflective of not only homeowners, but business people within the community. And so the CAT team, the way how they go about doing business is that they organize themselves in priority areas. If a community identifies, let's say 3 or 4 priority areas, they'll set up almost like a subcommittee. Let's say housing is one of them. They'll set up a subcommittee on housing to address those issues. What we find out in these communities is that developing leaders is very critical to these communities, developing community leaders who can speak on behalf of their community. So when we break up allow different people to lead different areas, we're using that process as well to cultivate and to groom community leaders. This is the process So the first thing when we take a community through this, going through the process, is that they have to identify what are their community priorities. And we coach them or guide them to really focus in on, not a whole laundry list. Typically, we will find them are, focusing on about 5 or 6 things the most, and to work on that. And through community meetings, one-on-one survey, we'll spend time to discover what those community priorities are. And this piece of the work here in identifying community priorities is dependent on where the community is. We have had some of these communities who have been through planning efforts before, so we don't go there trying to start from scratch. We go recognizing the work that has been done, and we build on that work. So, for each priority area that they identify, there's a goal, there's a concern, and this is how we call this cutting the issue. So if housing is a concern, what about housing are you concerned about? And so in some instances, it's about home ownership. Home ownership in this community is declining. It may be about house rehabilitation. It may be about rental housing. All of those things, they define they define the issues with their priorities under the concern. Then they come up with an outcome. If you should fix this problem, what would it look like? Then, of course, strategies, then action item, then taking it up to the city commission or the CRA for funding and implementation. And the CRA has been a very wonderful partner with us, and we appreciate them helping to fund these plans and to see them come to fruition. I'm cognizant of the time, so let me run through some of this. Again, my staff this effort, again, working with the Community Redevelopment Agency and various community organizations and churches, helping neighbors to come up with solutions to address their priority areas. The Greater Bond neighborhood was the first neighborhood to address, to develop a plan. This process took I'd say about 18 months. It's a very intensive process, working with them, defining the issues, coming up with solutions, engaging the broader neighborhood in these issues. So it's not something that we're going to do today and it's done tomorrow. It takes time and it takes effort, both on the part of the city staff as well as the neighborhood's involvement. So for the bond plan, it addressed 4 priority areas: community beautification, economic development, resident empowerment, neighborhood safety, and crime prevention. Every neighborhood that is going through this process has to address neighborhood safety and crime prevention. The plan was adopted by the community in September 2018, the CRA funded the plan in December 2018 to the tune of $6.4 million. Some of the pioneering projects that we have implemented in Greater Bond is the construction of a linear park, a residential facade program, streetscaping, TLH Farm. This is a farm it's an urban farm that teaches residents urban farming with the intent of them leaving that program and starting a business. Here are some pics of the homes that have been renovated through the housing facade program. Through the housing facade program, we provide grants up to $17,000, and all of this was directed by the neighborhood. They got $6.4 million, and out of the $6.4 million, they have elected to spend a little over $2 million on a residential facade program that provides grant to eligible homeowners of $17,000 to help with exterior repairs to their home. All right, here are some other pictures. Very interesting work happening here. We have funded over 100 homes. The first 13 homes have been completed. We are now working on the next batch. This is the linear park. The linear park connects an existing park to a newly constructed park. It's about 864 linear feet and was completed back early in the summer. Here are some pics of the linear park. Has provided, another opportunity to connect other areas of the community, providing pedestrian access and another new bike ped facility. This is a facility lit at night, so provide quite a community ambience. During the process, one of their community store came up, was on the market. We were able to, when I said we, the CRA was able to acquire that, and we're in the process of determining what the use of that store will be. This used to be a crime spot in the neighborhood, and with the CRA acquiring it and trying to repurpose that in of itself has addressed a lot of criminal activities within the neighborhood. All right. So in terms of accomplishments today in Bonn, we have seen a decrease in crime. Over to my right and perhaps your left, you'll see the hotspot maps here. You'll see over time they have decreased. I'm not saying all crime is absent from the community, but through this effort, we have seen a decrease in crime. The housing facade, when that program is completed, over 100 homes, or right at 100 homes will be improved. All of this work that we're doing in Bonn has stimulated over $850,000 in private investment. City investment here amount to $31 million, and that's inclusive of the FAMUA project and other water and sewer project. And when we survey the residents, over 76% of the residents, they have rated city services as good or very good. The other two plans that we have completed today, like I said, just this afternoon, the City Commission adopted the Griffin Heights plan and funded that to the tune of $2.25 million. Back in July, the CRA adopted the Frenchtown plan, funded that to $6.4 million. We're currently working with the Providence neighborhood. They back in 2003 completed a similar plan, and we're going through a refresh process. And the South City, which is the other neighborhood scheduled to go through this process, we're getting ready to engage with them in this effort. And I think I'm going to stop here. I think perhaps right around my time, but I'm going to stop here, let Dr. Kim come back, and then we can take questions at the end. I'll stop sharing. Oh, stop share.
Thank you, John, for a wonderful presentation. It is really great to see how the mode of planning changed basically from the top-down urban renewal model to really, working with the community and prioritizing or, listening to the community and developing a plan along with the community members, and how especially it was great to see how the positive changes that, you're actually seeing on the ground making an impact. So we talked, or John and I both talked a lot about CRA. I'm just gonna briefly introduce or explain what CRA is and my involvement with the CRA, and then and I'll keep it short so that we do have questions or time for questions. But so local governments in Florida are authorized to create what's called a community redevelopment agency under the state statute. And the goal of these agencies is to revitalize quote unquote blighted areas. And the term blighted has it's a whole baggage of history behind it, but I won't go into all of that. But it has to be a blighted neighborhood that needs revitalization. And the board members of the CRA are appointed by local elected officials per the statute. But in Tallahassee, the membership is essentially the same as the city commission. So the way that it works is that a district boundary is first defined. So we have two different districts in Tallahassee, which is Greater Frenchtown, South Side. So they're grouped together, the red areas, Greater Frenchtown and then South Side. And this is FSU and FAMU. And then we also have the downtown CRA, and these two districts operate separately. So what happens is that a boundary is drawn, and an area that's identified as blighted, and the CRA essentially receives a small portion of the property taxes coming from the properties within that boundary. And the CRA uses that revenue for reinvestment for which goes to the initiatives such as the Neighborhood First Plan. So I'll show you a budget of what CRA fund or revenue is going to look like in next year and for the next 5 years at the end, so that you have an idea of where the money is spent. So Tallahassee CRA has, the point that I also wanted to make was that these two districts, as I mentioned, are separate. So whatever money that comes from the Frenchtown South Side has to be spent within Frenchtown South Side, and the downtown same. So there are two separate pots of money. So Tallahassee CRA has a Citizens Advisory Committee, which is a 9-member advisory committee appointed by the board to represent the interest of the stakeholders within and around CRA districts. And you can see, check out the bylaw if you're interested. So basically, it's intended to be a sort of representation of the wide array of interest that exists within and around CRA. So you can see that neighborhood representatives from the Frenchtown and the South Side are to be appointed. And then there's Chamber of Commerce representative and business representative from the South Side. And there's one interested citizen. And then there are two non-voting members, Florida A&M and Florida State. And I serve as the non-voting member representing FSU. And so what the role of the Citizens Advisory Committee is to make recommendations to the CRA board as they make decisions regarding which projects are funded and how much and etc. So we meet every other month and discuss the agenda items that will go to the CRA board and make recommendation in terms of whether or not the citizens, the CAC supports or does not support or may recommend modification and etc. And we forward that to the board when they're actually making the actual decisions in terms of how the money is spent. And both the CRA board and the CAC meets every other month. And then if you click on this link, it takes you to the board docs Tallahassee, which you can see what the agenda, what's going to be on the agenda, and detailed items or detailed information for every single item that is that is going to be discussed at the CRA board and the CAC meeting. So if you're interested in joining us, please do. Our next meeting is going to be November 1st, I believe, the CAC one. But if actually, so the CRA board meets before that, I want to say October 28th is the CRA board meeting, and then the right afterwards there's a CAC meeting. So if you're interested in seeing what those meetings are like, please come. And I don't think I'll go into details of what the budget is, but I'll just show you the budget so that you can have an idea. what that looks like. So basically, we've recent years, we've identified priority investment areas: economic development, impact on poverty, public safety, quality of life, and infrastructure, etc. So as you can see under quality of life, you have the Greater Bond Neighborhood First Plan, which was $6.4 million. Frenchtown Southside that John just mentioned, $6.4 million, which is to be distributed over 5 years of 5 years. And there are also pots of money for facade improvements, affordable housing, and also for real estate development projects and nonprofit entities. So it's a wide range of projects and programs that are funded by the CRA board, by the CRA. And we as the Citizens Advisory Committee make recommendations in terms of which of which of the proposed projects and programs should get funding and how much. So I'll stop there and would love to hear your thoughts and questions. If there are any questions, be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for you. So what are some ways that we could get involved and help besides going to a CAC meeting, I guess? Are there specific things that you think there's a need that we could fill?
John, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll take that first. So one of the things that we have done in each of the neighborhood plan, this is if you want to help at the neighborhood level, is that we have identified action items, and along with each action items, there's a list of potential partners. And in some instances, they are churches. As you know, Trinity has had a history in partnering with community from Appalachia Ridge to Providence, taking on projects that they can help with. So I would say taking a look at the neighborhood plans and look at what type of expertise that you may have, what type of time commitment, money you may have, and may say, hey, this is a project as a church group that we could support. In fact, one of the beauty about the neighborhood plan for any community group, whether it's the university or the community college, looking for community projects, this is a place to go because you're looking at projects that the neighborhood have said, we want to do these things, and we're looking for partners to do them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I guess my take on the question would be that, please come to the meetings because I think political process or policy making and the politics of it and how engaged the citizens are really matter in these decision-making processes. So the more citizens interested in coming to these meetings and keeping decision makers and advisory committees accountable, I think is really critical for the overall success of the local government decision-making process. So
okay.
Yeah. And I definitely say that, so on one hand, an engagement at the policy level, in making certain that we have the right policies in place, our spending priorities are being directed towards our community. And if you want to be a doer and a shaker, making something happen in the community, then the neighborhood plans are a great place to look for projects that you, depending on your skills, your time, and your resources, that you could get interested in.
Sounds good. Thank you.
If you haven't had a chance to look at some of the community plans, I really encourage you to do that. There's fascinating history of the communities as well as what their goals are. And next week, we're going to hear from some of the residents of the communities. And we're going to focus primarily on Providence and Bond. So if you want to just look at those plans, that will give you some good background.
We have a question from Bill.
Hi, yes, thank you. I'm a resident basically of Leon County. I'm not in the city, but I had spent several years attending CRA meetings and attempting to, get involved in some business development plans from the gentleman doing, has a business called Cornucopia. He asked me to come and participate. And one of my concerns is that much of this is decontextualized to, or ahistorical, let me put it that way. And one of the things that I keep bringing up in the social organizations that I briefly joined is that if you are going to build a bridge across the road or across a river or across, between two hills, you don't just ask the people who live in that area how to build the bridge. You actually have to have engineers and construction people to analyze the structure of that area, of that geography. What I'm saying about the ahistorical nature of this is that we are now concerned about criminal behavior, when in fact, these communities are a result of criminal behavior. They are a result of basically decades of government-supported efforts to make sure that these folks had no power, did not build wealth to the point of making independent decisions. I am concerned that in America, we are focused on building wealth and power, and that these organizations repeatedly deny that opportunity for those residents to build wealth and power. Now, we talked about the community that was destroyed to create Cascades Park in that area. At one point, they were doing fairly well, but they were not permitted to create wealth and power, which is what America is all about. And I would like to see at some point where we are going to talk about the real history of these communities, all of the history, all of the crimes that have been committed, and how do these communities build wealth and power? And I'll leave it at that. I have many other things I'd like to address, but I think that's something I've been struggling with for a number of years, and a very close, unfortunate relationship with the CRA and the City Commission, and how frustrated the residents in the city have been for years and years, and not really being able to accomplish anything. And that's not America. America is about, I have the money and I have the power to do what I need to do that's in my best interest. But we spent 90 years of Jim Crow oppression making sure that that was not a structural system that existed or grew up in African-American communities. Thank you.
Were you gonna?
Yeah,
Dr.
I mean,
Kim?
yeah, I can respond briefly, but I mean, thank you for your comment. I mean, I try to bring in some of the structural and systemic racism that has led up to, what we see today in my first part. But, I totally agree with you in terms of, acknowledging the history, and especially in the context of Tallahassee, specific neighborhoods would be one of the first step, basically, in tackling the inequities that we have seen in even today. So what I did want to say is that and you're also right in terms of a historical context of CRA and CAC. And I am not the best person to speak to the past practices because I wasn't really around. But what I can say fairly confidently to you and everyone in this room is that the CRA and the CAC has made great strides in the recent years, and that I think if you come these days and participate in the process, it will be different from what you have experienced in the past, because that's what we're really sort of aiming to do at the CAC, and also trying to create the connections needed with the board members as well. So we're trying to create the rapport, and we're trying to make the CAC being heard in the process, basically. And I don't know if you've been following as well, but the CRA just hired a new executive director, which was one of the reason was, and it is a complete, outside person, not from city, has not engaged in any CRA activities. Someone who is from Tallahassee, and has worked in different cities and now coming back to Tallahassee. So the reason for hiring that executive director and doing an open search and doing an open candidate review was to create an environment that almost breaks from the CRA's past. So I wanted to let you know that, and also for this group as well.
And I just want to add to what Dr. Kim said. The Neighborhood First process, we don't just bring together a bunch of neighborhood folks and say, go at the issues that are taking place in your community. At each of these meetings, there are subject matter experts from the city, from nonprofit entities that come alongside neighborhood residents and provide guidance and expertise on issues. But at the end of the day, because this is a resident-led driven process, the solutions that are offered and the plan is based on neighborhood decisions. So they're not making these plans without the issue of engineers, whether they're dealing with stormwater, whether they're dealing with affordable housing. We have affordable housing expertise in the house. We're telling them, best practices and current city policies and programs. So when they make these decisions, they're making those decisions within the context of having been informed. And I do agree with you. One of the things that, I tell my staff when we go to a new community to first begin this work, I said the first 5 meetings is to give neighborhood residents a chance to hear their issues. We don't just want to go in and just try to do planning on top of their issues. They got to talk about the distrust, they got to talk about the disinvestment and all of that type of stuff. But at the end of the day, when all of that is over, this is your community, this is where you live. And if you want to make it better, now let's get to work. Let's design a plan that reflects your solutions, because I think the residents in Bond have ideas concerning, what are the solutions to address the things that are taking place in Bond. And so we through this process, we try to capture those ideas and bring forward a plan that reflects their idea. But I do agree with you. There's a lot of truth in there, and that's why each of the plan has had an economic development and resident empowerment element that's based on the needs of that particular community. Their desire for access to capital, access to to business resources to help them to create, small businesses in their community. So we're hearing from them, business training. Yeah, we know it's all at TCC or Lively, but can you bring it a little bit closer? Some of them have transportation. So all of those are transportation issues. So all of those are things that if you take a look at the plan, you'll see that the plan, touches on all of that. But I really appreciate your comments, Bill.
Thank you. And just briefly, another issue is, this is all pretty much brick and mortar development kind of issues. You do mention business. But again, in a historical context, there is a need to restore the human beings in these communities. And I don't necessarily believe that would be something that the city would lead, but it should be something that the city should fund, because the city and the county participated in the destruction of the social organization of these communities. And bricks and mortar is fine. That's something that absolutely needs to happen. But the human beings in the city need development. And we need to take a look at that.
Gloria, if I will just, if you look at the plan that was adopted tonight, the Griffin Heights plan, that plan was organized around two issues: people and places. People and places. So the place piece deal with what are the infrastructure issues that we need to fix in Griffin Heights. The people piece deal with what are the programs, what are the services that the residents need to be empowered to live their best life. So yeah, these neighborhood planning are far different from the comprehensive plan. They are people focused as well as place focused. A lot of programs are in here to address those type of needs. So, but I hear you. Thank you, Gloria.
Well, thank you to all of the speakers. And I should have also recognized Tisha Holmes, who's also a faculty member at FSU, who helped plan this program, and she will be here with us next week. So thank you all for coming, and we look forward to having you join us next week and hear from some of the community residents. And please do take a look at those plans in the meantime. Okay, have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.